It was the final year of high school, and I had just started dating Mark, my now fiancé. It was a time of excitement, anticipation, and bittersweet goodbyes as prom season was fast approaching. But for me, the excitement was overshadowed by fear. You see, my ex Daryl was a dangerous man, and despite my efforts to move on, he was still a looming threat in my life. Daryl and I met when I was going through a tough time. I was vulnerable, and he seemed like a source of comfort. He was older, 4 years older in fact. I was only 18, and he was 22. At first, everything seemed fine, but over time, his true nature came to light. He was kicked out of the army, and that's when things spiraled. He started using hard drugs, heroin mainly, and became increasingly violent. I tried to distance myself, but Daryl was relentless. He broke into my family's home multiple times, and I was forced to get a restraining order against him. Eventually, my family and I moved to a new house to escape him. Prom should have been an exciting night, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Daryl knew about prom. He and I had talked about going together before our breakup. It felt like a ticking time bomb. My friends knew how terrified I was, and they would drive me home after school, always making sure we weren't followed. But the thought of Daryl showing up to prom haunted me. Despite my fears, Mark was incredibly supportive. He assured me that if he didn't think it was safe, he wouldn't want me to go. His calm confidence made me feel a little more at ease, and I eventually agreed to attend prom with our friends. The night of prom came, and we rented a limousine with a group of friends. The venue was a fancy catering hall about 30 minutes away from home. For the first part of the night, everything seemed fine. We had a nice dinner, danced a bit, and hung out with friends. But I couldn't help feeling paranoid. Every time I glanced around, I felt like Daryl was there, watching me. At one point, one of Mark's friends handed me a small bottle of vodka, suggesting it might help calm my nerves. I took it to the bathroom, drank it, and though it nearly made me sick, I started to feel a little more relaxed after a while. Later that night, it was time for the after-prom party, a tradition where everyone continues celebrating at someone's house. As we walked out of the venue, I noticed a car parked near the entrance. Its lights were off and someone was sitting inside, wearing a baseball cap. I couldn't see their face. A chill ran down my spine. I pointed the car out to Mark, but he reassured me that it was nothing. Still, the uneasy feeling didn't leave. We got into our friend's car and drove to Melissa's house for the after-party. During the drive to Melissa's house, I kept glancing behind us, looking for any signs of someone following. There were so many cars on the road, though, that I couldn't tell. Mark, noticing how tense I was, leaned over and whispered, "Relax. Everything's fine." He squeezed my hand, and for a moment I felt a wave of calm wash over me. But the paranoia was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. Melissa's house was buzzing with people. By the peak of the night, there were at least 20 of us, all drinking and laughing. Despite the fun atmosphere, I couldn't completely shake the feeling that something was wrong. After a few hours, Mark and I decided to head home. He called his sister to come pick us up. When she arrived, we said our goodbyes and headed out to her car. As we walked to the street, I scanned the area for any suspicious vehicles, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. I convinced myself that my paranoia was just that, paranoia. Mark's sister drove us back to his house, where I planned to spend the night. His mom and sister were home, but his dad, a retired cop, was working a late shift. We quietly slipped downstairs to Mark's room, which took up the entire den floor of the house. It was a cozy space, complete with a mini kitchen, living room, and bedroom. A sliding glass door led to the backyard, and since it was a warm night, a few of the windows were cracked open. We put on a movie, hoping to relax after the long night. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the room. It came from the sliding glass door. My heart jumped into my throat. Mark immediately stood up and pulled the curtain aside. There was no one outside, but stuck to the glass was a post-it note with one word written on it. Bitch. My blood ran cold. Daryl had found me. He had followed me from the prom to Melissa's house, and now here. My worst fear had come true. We rushed upstairs to wake up Mark's mom, who immediately called the police and Mark's dad. The minutes dragged on like hours as we waited for the police to arrive. Every noise made me jump. I couldn't stop shaking, knowing that Daryl was somewhere out there. When the doorbell finally rang, followed by a series of loud knocks, it was a relief to know help had arrived. The police came in, and I had to explain the whole terrifying history with Daryl, the restraining order, and now the fact that he had followed me again. The police asked if we had any security cameras on the property, but unfortunately, Mark's family didn't. They also asked if I had any recent messages from Daryl or knew where he was living, but I didn't. I had cut off all contact with him. Mark's dad arrived shortly after, and he promised to drive me home in his police car to ensure I wasn't followed again. On the ride home, I called my parents, and as soon as I heard my dad's voice, I broke down in tears. I was terrified, exhausted, and just wanted this nightmare to end. The following week, Mark's parents installed security cameras around their house. A few days later, one of the cameras picked up motion in the yard. Mark's dad, who was alerted by the notification on his phone, grabbed his gun and went outside. The smell of gasoline hit him immediately. He followed the scent and the sound of liquid being poured, and there he saw Daryl pouring gasoline along the sides of the house. With his gun drawn, Mark's dad ordered Daryl to drop the gas can and put his hands up. Daryl, realizing he was caught, didn't resist. He was arrested right then and there. Daryl was charged with attempted arson, and because he had violated the restraining order and had a history of stalking, his sentence was harsh, over 30 years in prison. It was a bittersweet victory, knowing that the man who had tormented me for years was finally behind bars. But the relief of being safe didn't come immediately. It took time to rebuild my sense of security. Looking back on everything, the most ironic part of it all is that my future father-in-law, a retired cop, was the one who caught Daryl in the act. It felt like the universe had finally given me justice after so many years of living in fear. Daryl was gone, and I could finally start living my life without constantly looking over my shoulder. I still think about those years of my life sometimes. The fear, the anxiety, and the uncertainty. But I also think about how lucky I was to have people like Mark and his family by my side. They helped me through the darkest time of my life. And now, years later, I can finally say that I'm free from Daryl's grip. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that trusting your instincts and surrounding yourself with supportive people can make all the difference.